Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit BillHowe.com. And by the Conrad Trebas Foundation, Darlene Marcos Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.
A toxic gas used as an ingredient during World War II to kill millions of people is being detected in communities near the Tijuana River. Thanks for joining us. I'm John Carroll in for Maya Trabulsi. Imperial Beach city officials, medical professionals, and residents are demanding the county, state, and federal government step in. KPBS video journalist Matthew Bowler has more on what was found and the risk it poses.
Hydrogen cyanide gas. That's something that's used as a chemical of war.
Dr. Matthew Dixon from South Bay Urgent Care joined officials in Imperial Beach this morning to ring the alarm bell. Researchers from UC San Diego and SDSU leading air quality testing found toxic levels of both hydrogen sulfide and hydrogen cyanide as recently as early this morning. They were in the air near the Tijuana River over a small waterfall.
Our region is facing these dangerous levels of toxic gases. So this is not just an environmental issue, it is a serious public health emergency. Just last night from approximately 1 to 2:30 a.m., alarming levels of toxic gases were detected across several locations.
The gases detected are hydrogen sulfide, or H2S, which is used in industries like oil refining, but it's also a byproduct of sewage systems according to OSHA. It smells like rotten eggs, too. Hydrogen cyanide, or HCN gas, on the other hand, has had some horrific uses. But it is also an industrial chemical used for electroplating, among other applications. Imperial Beach Mayor Paloma Aguirre wants the county, state, and federal government to help. She is calling for air filters and purifiers to be distributed to residents. She is also asking for gas and particle monitors to be placed around the Tijuana River. She wants signs up to warn people about the toxic gas, and she says she wants the health of students and teachers at nearby schools to be protected. Kimberly Prather is an atmospheric chemist with UC San Diego's Scripps Institution of Oceanography.
Everybody should put a filter for particles and gases in their house as soon as possible. That is as a scientist, because I study the filtration too.
Prather says she even told her researchers not to stay in the area. She says cyanide gas is heavier than air, and at night the air is cooler, therefore more dense, and the gas cannot dissipate, causing levels to rise to even more dangerous levels. Ramon Chariz grew up in San Ysidro. He's got questions about why federal and state officials have not yet declared emergencies to address the sewage problem.
And so you think, is it border politics? Is it environmental racism? Like, what's happening here? Why is it that it's okay to neglect this community?
South Bay Urgent Care Dr. Dixon says the situation could be very dangerous for nearby residents.
If you didn't realize that those gases were there, thought you smelled something and were jogging by that bridge where the Tijuana River goes underneath, you could be dead in minutes.
Matthew Bowler, KPBS News.
San Diego Gas and Electric says this weekend's record-breaking heat wave drove record electricity demand, putting a strain on the energy grid. SDG&E says that demand, coupled with extreme heat, resulted in more than 13,000 outages across the county. Our media partner, KGTV, was in Valley Center today, where nearly 300 homes and businesses were without power this morning. They spoke with the general manager of the Valley Center Municipal Water District about how they prepared for the triple-digit temperatures.
We haven't been affected by any outages. This facility is fully powered, as we have genset generators that come on automatically. We have generators at our critical pumping stations, and then I have 4 large generators that I can deploy.
SDG&E recommends customers experiencing outages check their breakers, use flashlights, not candles, and limit the times you open your fridge and freezer. They also say to check on your neighbors.
We're easing our way out of a very hot stretch tonight. Still mild in the lower 70s, but at least that's down from where we were the previous night. And of course, I'll tell you the trend coming up in the forecast ahead.
A massive fire is burning dangerously close to homes in San Bernardino County, forcing thousands to evacuate. CAL FIRE says the line fire grew to more than 23,000 acres today and is just 3% contained. It started in the Highland area Thursday. An estimated 36,000 structures are in the fire's path. At least 3 firefighters have been injured. Governor Newsom has declared a state of emergency. A new major poll has former President Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris in a dead heat. The New York Times and Siena College survey puts Trump with 48% and Harris with 47% of the vote from likely voters. That falls within the margin of error. The poll also found 28% of respondents feel like they need to learn more about Harris, but only 9% said they need to know more about Trump. Tomorrow night, the two candidates will face off in a debate. Julia Benbrook has more on how they've been preparing.
Vice President Kamala Harris has spent the days leading up to the debate hunkered down with her team in Pittsburgh, making brief public appearances.
Are you ready to face Donald Trump?
Yes, I am. Yes.
Aides say Harris has held mock debates and is leaning on advice from former President Donald Trump's previous Democratic opponents, President Joe Biden and former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, hoping to benefit from their experiences.
He plays from this really old and tired playbook, right, where there's no floor for him in terms of how low he will go, and we should be prepared for that.
The vice president has been reading briefing papers about Trump's positions and past comments, including the insults he's directed at her. Despite the recent change at the top of the Democratic ticket, sources say Trump's debate prep strategy hasn't changed much since he faced Biden in June.
We're run by stupid people. Stupid people. And we found that out at the debate with Joe. How did that work out? And we're going to find it out again on Tuesday night. Is anybody going to be watching?
The former president argues he doesn't need formal preparation, such as mock debates, but has been meeting with senior advisors, policy experts, and outside allies to ready himself for Tuesday.
We talk about it, but there's not a lot you can do. You either know your subject or not. You either have good policy or not.
Reporting in Philadelphia, I'm Julia Benbrook.
As we've seen already this election cycle, debate performances can make or break campaigns. But there's more to pay attention to than just theatrics. Coming up, what voters should be watching out for. The San Diego City Council is holding off on a proposal to grant the mayor new authority amid a homelessness and housing emergency. It would give the mayor the power to accept and spend grant money to respond to the emergency and suspend city council approval for contracts under $5 million. That authority would only be granted if San Diego's unhoused population is more than double the shelter beds, or if it increases by more than 20% in a single year. The council was set to consider the proposal today, but they sent it back to staff to determine its impacts on city workers. State regulators are suspending residential substance abuse treatment at Veterans Village of San Diego. KPBS Military and Veterans Affairs reporter Andrew Dyer has more on how this will impact local veterans services.
The temporary suspension is the first step in revoking Veterans Village's license to provide residential substance use treatment. A news source reported last week the California Department of Healthcare Services issued the temporary suspension order to go into effect today. The agency says it's in response to safety concerns and 7 resident deaths over the last 2 years. Veterans Village receives a variety of funding for its various programs. Some treatments are paid for by the VA and others from the county and Medi-Cal. This new development leaves Veterans Village ineligible to receive reimbursement from Medi-Cal. Local and federal officials are scrambling to get affected veterans into other programs. VA officials have been on site checking in with residents. VA San Diego said today about a third of the 141 veterans it's placed at Veterans Village are there for substance use treatment. The VA has halted new admissions to Veterans Village, but those affected by the state's action may continue living there while receiving substance use treatment elsewhere. They're offering the same deal to residents previously receiving Medi-Cal funds. The agency says veterans can also switch to one of Veterans Village's other transitional housing programs and remain at the facility. Veterans Village of San Diego didn't respond to requests for comment. Andrew Dyer, KPBS News.
Researchers at Scripps Institution of Oceanography are making strides toward predicting bluff collapses before they happen. KPBS investigative reporter Scott Rodd says the ultimate goal is to create an early warning system that saves lives.
Patrick Davis and his late wife, Julie Davis, moved to Encinitas more than 40 years ago. The coastal town was an idyllic place to start a family.
We raised 4 children and grew up in this beautiful Encinitas community and, couldn't have been happier. We had a wonderful life here.
In August of 2019, friends and family gathered at nearby Grandview Beach for a celebration. Davis's sister-in-law, Elizabeth Charles, had just completed breast cancer treatment. He says the lifeguard on duty suggested they sit just north of the lifeguard tower.
It was high tide at the time, so we were probably only 10 feet away from the cliff, and there was maybe another 10 feet at the most in front of us where the waves weren't breaking.
The kids paddled out on surfboards. People on the beach ate sandwiches and relaxed in the sun.
So we sat there and, we're just enjoying ourselves. And next thing we knew, the cliff let loose. And then it was just pure bedlam after that.
Fire department emergency. Please hurry. Grandview Beach, 1700 Neptune Avenue. There's a landslide and there are people underneath. Grandview, right next to the lifeguard station. Right next to the lifeguard station.
A section of the bluff had collapsed, sending huge rocks and debris onto the beach below. Several people were pinned under the crushing weight of the fallen boulders.
Oh my God, there might be a death. What happened? Oh my God, I don't know.
Emergency responders rushed to the scene, but some of the injuries were too severe. Davis lost his wife, his sister-in-law, and his daughter, Annie.
We've never been the same family since.
After 5 years, Davis is able to talk about his wife, Julie.
But I can't talk about my daughter. Losing a child is just one of the worst things any parent could ever go through. So that's been a real difficult thing. So if you want me to get emotional, just start talking about Annie.
Davis no longer spends time on the beach at Grandview, but he often walks down the long staircase to see where people are sitting.
And almost every time I've gone down to the beach, I see people sitting right against the bluffs. I remind the lifeguards that part of their job is to keep people away from the bluffs, and they then respond and run down and tell people how dangerous it is.
But it shouldn't be on the shoulders of one grieving man to keep beachgoers safe. Fortunately, state lawmakers and local researchers are digging into the problem. The ultimate hope is to develop an early warning system that saves lives along the coast. Scientists at Scripps Institution of Oceanography are a few years into their research, and the early results are promising. Mark Zumberg is a research geophysicist at Scripps.
We've had 3 cases where it was pretty clear something was going to happen.
Each time, researchers accurately predicted a bluff collapse at a specific location, sometimes more than a day in advance. To gather data, they installed sensors called tilt meters along the bluffs in Del Mar and Encinitas. Zumberg says the device is like a very sophisticated leveling tool.
If you could set out a carpenter's level and very precisely keep track of the position of that bubble, you would be able to tell if the land is tilting.
Soon, researchers will install custom sensors that can measure land movement down to the diameter of an atom. Scripps researcher Adam Young says early warning systems do exist for inland landslides.
But something specific for the coastline, which involves other processes like waves and tides and that sort of thing, I'm not aware of anything like that.
He's optimistic that a warning system along the coast is feasible.
What we're seeing so far is quite promising that we'll be able to use these signals in the future to develop a system.
These early results are remarkable, but the scientists caution there's a lot that remains unknown. And even if a warning system can be developed, it'll likely take years to roll out and require action from state lawmakers. Assemblywoman Tasha Berner represents the coastal areas of Del Mar and Encinitas. She authored the legislation that kickstarted the research.
My hope would be by 2030, the pilot would be going across California in these probably selected locations that are most acutely experiencing bluff collapses.
By 2035, Berner believes the system could be rolled out up and down the West Coast. News about the progress at Scripps left Patrick Davis feeling encouraged.
Because I think this could be just a really valuable step in getting, making the bluffs a lot safer down there.
Davis's family has filed a lawsuit against the state, the city of Encinitas, and a local homeowners association. In addition to seeking financial damages, they're asking for policy changes to improve safety along the coast. Scott Rodd, KPBS News.
Fasting has a lot of health benefits, but the physical reaction to the absence of food is not something we've entirely understood. KPBS Sci-Tech reporter Thomas Fudge tells us about a discovery at Scripps Research in the way the gut talks to the brain.
When we eat, food sends a signal that promotes the release of insulin, which delivers nutrients to our bodies. When we don't eat, we don't get that signal in our brains, and our bodies start to use fat stores to deliver the nutrition we need. That's what we thought, but it's not the whole story, because it's leaving out two important players. Scripps Research neuroscientist Supriya Srinivasan calls those molecules FLIP7 in the brain and INT7 in the gut.
The INT7 peptide that's secreted from the gut functions in the neurons that release FLIP7 and acts as a gate and says, stop.
Which means stop burning fat. Now, it may seem strange that an insulin antagonist like INT7 would tell our brain to stop burning fat during a fast, and its effect is ultimately overridden. But Srinivasan says understanding the power of the molecule could provide new medical ways to begin fat loss among people with obesity. You can imagine a drug that blocked INT7 and its effects would promote the burning of fat, not prevent it.
What this study allows us to start thinking about is how insulin antagonism in mammals may be a physiologically relevant tool that could be harnessed for metabolic benefits.
The experiments at Scripps Research were done on worms called C. elegans. They're great to study because they have a remarkable physical similarity to humans. Here's a photo of one of them with that messenger molecule in green. When it comes to fasting, it has shown many health benefits. A study of firefighters in San Diego who did a daily 14-hour fast showed they had lower blood pressure and lower blood sugar. Srinivasan says there's more.
Both fasting and caloric restriction have beneficial effects on lifespan. That's been shown.
And scientific advances could make those health benefits more within the reach of people who have suffered the effects of weight gain. Thomas Fudge, KPBS News.
Soccer fans packed Snapdragon Stadium on Sunday to watch one of the all-time greats one last time.
I think she'll take the goal. That's the way she has always been. Team before self, and now some final hugs as this moment will be one she will remember, and all of these fans will remember.
San Diego Wave forward Alex Morgan took off her cleats in the middle of the pitch just 13 minutes into her final game. She retired after a 15-year career, competing on the U.S. national women's team and the Wave since 2022.
I had the sunglasses on because I did these ones, and also knowing that she's out there battling in 104 degrees, pregnant, like, what a beast.
She did so much great stuff in her life, and I feel like now she's having a baby. It's like, wow, she's pregnant. Like, she's been playing all through this, and she's been my hero.
Morgan is pregnant with her second child. Fans are hoping she could return to professional soccer as a coach in the future. As people all over California feel the heat, a state law that took effect earlier this year aims to keep student athletes safe during extreme heat. Ashley Sharp explains.
If it gets into the red, we're completely off.
This little gadget is a game changer in high school sports across California. Every school now required to have one to tackle risk when playing and practicing in extreme heat. At Jesuit High School football practice Tuesday,
right now we're in the yellow, which would mean we were monitoring as needed, but there is a mandatory 4-minute water break every hour.
The wet bulb globe thermometer measures ground and air temperature, humidity, and wind. It spits out a number ranking that corresponds to the new rules from CIF, the state's governing body for high school sports.
So category 3, if you go above 92.1, that is black, no outdoor workouts, period.
Landing in orange or red means required restrictions, from mandatory breaks to shorter practices, taking off helmets or pads, and even rescheduling.
What we have seen schools do, especially for Friday nights when games are happening, they're starting games a little bit later. JV maybe not happening, or maybe JV's happening on Thursday late.
Will DeBoard is assistant commissioner for CIF's Sac Joaquin section. As far as this week's heat wave is concerned,
Certainly I can see it hitting the orange for sure, and that would mean practice time's limited, game time is limited.
Jesuit's athletic director says they're bracing for the heat.
Today and then, tomorrow's practice is going to probably have to be pushed back a little later.
This season, for the first time, the Marauders are actually able to practice and play at night.
Luckily, we have stadium lights now that we can utilize the lights to push our practices until 8 o'clock to make sure that we're getting a full practice in, but staying out of the hottest time of the day.
We are finally saying goodbye to some of the excessive heat that we have had in place across our area. So that is some great news. By the way, over the weekend, we managed to shatter records in places like Ramona, El Cajon, Escondido by more than 4 degrees. So we're ready to be finished with the heat, and that is the lead part of our forecast here. We're easing our way out of it tonight and in through the upcoming days. Keeping with the dry pattern, though, really no big signs of moisture coming back into our area, though some parts of California will be getting in on a little bit of rain action. As we work our way, though, towards the coast, the marine layer will be thickening, too, so we'll notice that trend, which ultimately helps to keep the numbers down in the days to come. Tonight, 71 for the low in the city. Of course, again, that is very mild for this time of year, but at least cooler than where we were some of the previous nights. As you look towards Escondido, 64 for the low, and Mount Laguna coming in at 67 degrees. Heading into tomorrow, the sun is still out. It's still bright, but at least with a little bit more of a marine layer towards the coast, we'll try to make things a little bit more temperable. 82 for the high Oceanside, coming in at 83. Mount Laguna, 74. And even Borrego Springs, 110. That's down the trend, at least, from the past few days. As we look into Wednesday, the story across Northern California will be trying to bring back some moisture with a new storm system coming in. The problem with this storm system does have a lot of winds, mostly across Nevada and Utah. So we'll see that be a fire threat farther north through the southwestern U.S., but not really in our area. Though keep in mind, it does stay dry, so fire risk always there this time of year. Upcoming days, we go back into the mid-70s towards the coast, which feels more like we should this time of year. So the rest of the week here looking much better, especially as you get Wednesday and beyond. That's when those numbers are much more bearable. In fact, into the 80s for inland communities. As you look towards the mountain locations, we're going to keep things back to the 60s beyond tomorrow, which is still in the mid-70s for your highs. And as we transition to those desert spots, you can tell those numbers do come out of the triple digits, so there is relief in sight. For KPBS News, I'm AccuWeather meteorologist Melissa Constanzer.
I'm Amna Navaz. Tonight on the News Hour, what's motivating voters in the swing state of Pennsylvania to back Kamala Harris or Donald Trump? That's coming up at 7 after Evening Edition on KPBS.
Election season is kicking into high gear. With races at every level from school boards to the White House, candidates are going head-to-head, putting their policies and personalities on full display for voters. Reporter Michael Yoshida has more on how debates can shape an election and what to watch for in tomorrow's high-stakes presidential debate.
Debates and their memorable moments historically are critical to candidates' successes and failures.
The 1980s are now calling to ask for their foreign policy back.
President Joe Biden and former President Donald Trump's matchup changed the 2024 race entirely.
If
We finally beat Medicare.
Now, Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump are facing off for the first time.
For the typical viewer who's watching this with some degree of how am I going to vote and I'm trying to inform myself, whereas Kamala Harris coming from on policy and personality, whereas Donald Trump coming from on policy and credibility.
Frank Sesno of George Washington University says even though theatrics often replace substance, when watching any political debate, voters should
listen closely to what these candidates say about the particulars of policy, how they would pay for them, what the implications are, how far they would reach, how they would implement them.
And note how the candidates respond to each other.
The interaction between the two of them will be very important. One, for how they define themselves and they try to define the other. Two, how they deal with a difficult situation.
The debate should last around 90 minutes, which may seem like a big commitment, but Sesno says it's an investment every voter should make.
Who of these two candidates is saying something that will address the issues and the problems that I and my family are confronting, and who seems most credible and most relatable on that level?
In Washington, I'm Michael Yoshida reporting.
We will carry the presidential debate and PBS NewsHour's analysis live starting at 6 tomorrow night, right here on KPBS. You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm John Carroll. Have a great evening.
Major funding for KPBS Evening Edition has been made possible in part by Bill Howe Family of Companies, providing San Diego with plumbing, heating, and air restoration, flood and remodeling services for over 40 years. Call 1-800-BILL-HOWE or visit billhowe.com. And by the Conrad Prebys Foundation, Darlene Marco Shiley, and by the following. And by viewers like you. Thank you.